Sarah, we need team players here, not lone wolves. John announced to the entire executive team during our Monday morning meeting. Not in private, not with any warning. Right there in the conference room, with every department head watching. My name is John White, 39 years old, Vice President of Strategy at Nexus Dynamics for 12 years until about 10 minutes ago. I nodded once, closed my laptop, and said, "Understood." John had been CEO for all of 6 weeks, brought in by the new investment group that wanted someone with a proven track record of scaling companies for rapid growth and eventual acquisition. He wore expensive suits, used phrases like cultural transformation and strategic realignment, and had never once visited our engineering labs or spoken to our longest-serving clients. I cleared my office without argument, 26 minutes flat. One box for personal items, another for strategic planning documents I'd meticulously developed over the past decade. Market analyses, competitive intelligence, product roadmaps, the invisible architecture that had guided our company's growth from 50 employees to 500. "John, this isn't personal," John said, appearing in my doorway as I packed, his voice softer now that we were alone. "We just need someone who can work within our new framework. Someone who understands that collaboration means alignment." I kept packing. The past 3 quarters speak for themselves. Numbers aren't everything in modern business. We need vision, adaptability, team cohesion. I didn't bother explaining that those numbers, the 340% revenue growth over my tenure, came from relationships I'd built methodically with clients, partners, and industry contacts across Silicon Valley. From late-night strategy sessions with the engineering teams, from remembering the names of our biggest clients' kids and their business challenges. John wouldn't understand that my lone wolf style was what kept us ahead of competitors during the market downturn of 2021, that my refusal to follow conventional wisdom was why we'd captured 23% market share in our sector, while others consolidated or failed. I shook hands with my team on the way out, wished them success. I meant it. Good people who deserved better than what was coming. Daniel from product development looked like he wanted to say something, but I shook my head slightly. No need to make this harder than it had to be. Sarah from marketing hugged me in the elevator, tears in her eyes. "This is insane, John. You built half the strategy that got us here." I squeezed her shoulder. "Companies change direction," I said quietly. "Just focus on your work." On the drive home, my phone lit up with messages. Shocked colleagues, confused clients who'd somehow already heard. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the hiking trail overlooking the valley and parked at the Vista Point. For the first time in 12 years, I had nowhere to be at 2 p.m. on a Monday. "Congratulations on your freedom," I muttered to myself, watching the tech campuses sprawl below. What John didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 8 months. Not because I was psychic, but because I was thorough. The signs had been there since the investment group took majority control. The private meetings I wasn't invited to, the org charts being redrawn, consultants asking pointed questions about departmental efficiencies. More importantly, what they didn't know was that the strategic framework I'd built at Nexus wasn't just theoretical. I'd been quietly testing it in the real world, and it was working better than I'd ever imagined. I joined Nexus when it was 3 guys in a garage in Palo Alto with a revolutionary idea for enterprise software automation. The CEO back then was Tommy Reeves, an engineer with brilliant technical vision, but zero business sense. Their product could streamline complex data processes that took corporations weeks to complete, reducing them to hours. But they couldn't sell effectively, couldn't scale the business model, couldn't compete against established players with deeper pockets. Tommy needed someone who could take his technology and build a real company around it. "We need someone who understands both the tech and the business side," he told me during my interview, pointing to a whiteboard covered in technical diagrams and sales projections that didn't add up. "You've worked at 3 startups that went public. Show us how to be number 4. After 6 years in product strategy at various tech companies, including one that IPO'd at $2.8 billion valuation, I knew how to build scalable business models. Not by following industry templates, but by understanding each company's unique ecosystem. Clients, competitors, partners, market dynamics, the dozens of variables that determine success or failure. I spent my first year at Nexus on the road, visiting every major client personally, learning their pain points, their growth trajectories, their decision-making processes. Some were Fortune 500 companies with complex procurement requirements. Others were agile startups that needed solutions yesterday. Each required a different approach, a customized relationship strategy. By year 3, we had the industry's most robust client retention rate, 97.3%. Our revenue per customer was 60% higher than industry average because I'd structured our partnerships around long-term value creation, not just software licensing. Tommy understood what I was building. Whatever you're doing with these relationships, keep doing it. He'd say, during our quarterly reviews, you've created something special here. Our clients don't just buy from us. They collaborate with us. But Tommy sold his shares last year. Said he wanted to focus on pure research, maybe start something new. The investment group that acquired a controlling stake immediately began professionalizing operations. New reporting structures, new performance metrics, new strategic initiatives that prioritize short-term growth over sustainable relationships. And finally, John, the first crack appeared during his second week. He canceled my annual client summit, calling it an unnecessary expense in the digital transformation era. The second came during a strategy meeting where he dismissed my concerns about accelerating our product development timeline. Our clients need to adapt to us, not vice versa. He said confidently, we're the market leader. The third was overhearing him tell someone on the phone that strategy was stuck in startup mode and needed enterprise-level thinking. I could have fought harder, could have explained that our success was built on precisely the relationship-first approach he was dismantling, that our clients worked with us because we understood their businesses as well as they did, not just because our software solved their problems. But I recognized a pattern. I'd seen it at my previous companies. New leadership determined to make their mark by changing what already worked, convinced that their external perspective was more valuable than institutional knowledge. So 8 months ago, I started making copies of my client contact lists, backing up my strategic frameworks, and more importantly, I started implementing something I've been planning since my MBA thesis 7 years earlier. I registered a consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Solutions. Just me, no employees, no office, barely any expenses. I began offering specialized advisory services to companies looking to optimize their enterprise software implementations. Completely separate from Nexus, completely unrelated to our client base. What I discovered was that my strategic framework, the one I developed at Nexus, wasn't just applicable to our specific market segment. It could be generalized, refined, and applied across multiple industries. The management consulting clients paid me $15,000 per project for what amounted to a few weeks of analysis and strategy development. More importantly, they kept coming back, referring colleagues, expanding project scopes. By month 6, I was bringing in $50,000 per month from consulting work. By month 8, I had a waiting list of potential clients and had incorporated as a full LLC with proper business structures. I wasn't competing with Nexus, wasn't violating any non-compete clauses that didn't exist anyway. I was simply proving to myself that my approach had value beyond the specific context where I developed it. When John announced his restructuring plan 3 weeks ago, the one that would eliminate my position along with 15% of our workforce, I was ready. Not emotionally ready, that still stung, but practically ready. Meridian Strategic Solutions had evolved from a side project to a viable business with recurring revenue and documented success stories. What I hadn't expected was how quickly things would fall apart once I was gone. 3 days after my firing, I got a call from Jennifer Walsh, VP of Operations at TechFlow Industries, one of our biggest clients. Heard what happened at Nexus. She said, complete shock. You were the only one there who really understood our integration challenges. I told her I appreciated the sentiment, but couldn't discuss Nexus business anymore. She laughed. I'm not calling about Nexus, John. I'm calling about Meridian Strategic Solutions. Sarah from your old marketing team mentioned you've been doing consulting work. We have a project we'd like to discuss. That conversation led to 3 more. By the end of the week, I had 4 new consulting contracts worth $180,000 in total project value. None of them involved Nexus directly, but several involved companies evaluating alternatives to Nexus's software solutions. Companies that had grown frustrated with the increasingly impersonal service model John was implementing. Companies that wanted a strategic partner, not just a software vendor. I met with my lawyer, David Kim, to review my employment agreements and ensure everything I was doing was completely above board. Good news, he said after reviewing my contracts. No non-compete clause, which is unusual for an executive position. Standard confidentiality agreement. But that only covers proprietary information, not general industry knowledge or relationships you've built. You're clear to operate as long as you're not directly competing or sharing trade secrets. That's when I realized the scope of John's mistake. He'd eliminated my position to cut costs and remove what he saw as resistance to his transformation agenda. But in doing so, he released me to become exactly what Nexus needed most, a real competitor. Someone who understood their strengths and weaknesses intimately. Someone with deep relationships in their client base. Someone with proven strategic capabilities and no corporate constraints. 2 weeks after my termination, I received an unexpected call. Tommy Reeves wanted to have lunch. We met at a small cafe in Mountain View, away from the Nexus office and the industry gossip mill. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes still had that intense focus I remembered. So, he said after we ordered, "Heard you've been liberated from corporate life. How's that working out for you?" "Better than expected," I replied. "Turns out there's demand for strategic thinking that puts client relationships first." Tommy nodded slowly. "Funny thing, I've been getting calls from our old clients. Well, Nexus's current clients. They're not happy with the changes John is implementing. Apparently, he's standardizing the service model, reducing customization, increasing prices across the board. Who would have thought that treating clients like interchangeable revenue units wouldn't work? I try to keep my expression neutral. Not my concern anymore. Of course not, Tommy agreed. But here's what might interest you as an independent consultant. I've been approached by several companies about licensing my new automation technology. More advanced than what Nexus has, different market applications. Problem is, I know how to build technology, not businesses. I need someone who understands enterprise strategy, client relationships, market positioning. I set down my coffee cup, studying his face. "Are you offering me a job, Tommy?" "Not a job," he said. "A partnership. I've got the technology, you've got the business expertise. We split everything 50-50, build something new, something better than what Nexus has become. I already have interested investors, clients ready to beta test, even some of our former employees who are, let's say, available for new opportunities." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about Meridian strategic solutions anymore. This was about building a real alternative to what Nexus was becoming under John's leadership. A company that valued relationships over efficiency metrics, innovation over standardization, long-term partnerships over short-term profits. Everything John was systematically destroying in his quest for rapid scalability. I spent the weekend thinking about Tommy's proposition. Monday morning, I called him back with 3 conditions. Complete operational autonomy over business strategy, a formal board structure to prevent future sellouts, and a commitment to the relationship-first principles that had made us successful before. He agreed to all 3. By Wednesday, we had filed incorporation papers for Nexus' predecessor, a name that reflected both our connection to the past and our commitment to moving forward. Within 2 weeks, we had our first major client, TechFlow Industries, the same company that had initially reached out to me for consulting services. Jennifer Walsh made the decision easy. "We're tired of being treated like we're lucky to use Nexus's software," she told me during our final negotiation call. "We want a partner who understands our business, not a vendor who thinks we should adapt to their processes." Tommy's new automation platform combined the customized implementation strategy one developed, offer them everything Nexus provided plus the relationship-focused service model they'd lost. John found out about Nexus' predecessor the way most people in Silicon Valley find out about new competitors, through TechFlow's public announcement of their technology partnership. The same day that press release went live, my phone started ringing. First John himself, then his head of business development, then their general counsel. I let them all go to voicemail. I had nothing to say to them yet. That evening, I stood in the small office space Tommy and I had leased in Redwood City, looking at the whiteboard where we'd mapped out our 6-month plan. 12 potential clients identified, 8 former Nexus employees interested in joining us, 3 strategic partnerships in development. The logo designer had delivered our brand identity that afternoon. Clean, professional, forward-looking. Everything John had tried to make Nexus into, but with soul. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my former marketing colleague. Heard about the new venture. John called an emergency meeting today. Everyone's talking. He's bringing in more consultants to analyze client satisfaction metrics. Apparently, retention rates have dropped 18% since the restructuring. I smiled slightly, typed back, not my concern anymore. Focus on your work. But it was becoming my concern, just not in the way John might expect. I wasn't building Nexus' predecessor to destroy Nexus. I was building it to prove that the principles John had discarded, the relationship-first approach he called outdated, weren't just nostalgic idealism. They were competitive advantages that, when executed properly, could beat efficiency-focused standardization every time. The real test would come in the next phase, moving from one major client to building a sustainable competitive alternative, proving that team player didn't mean following orders blindly, but rather building consensus around principles that actually worked. John had taught me an important lesson about modern business. Sometimes the only way to preserve what you've built is to rebuild it somewhere else. Sometimes being a true team player means having the courage to start your own team. The war began in earnest 3 weeks after TechFlow's announcement. I was reviewing candidate resumes in our new office when Tommy burst through the door holding his laptop. "You need to see this," he said, turning the screen toward me. It was Nexus's website, completely redesigned. New tagline, Enterprise Automation Evolved. New messaging focused on cutting-edge innovation and scalable solutions. And prominently featured, a client testimonial from Harrison Industries, one of our former prospects who'd been in talks with Nexus' predecessor. "They got a Harrison first," I said, reading through the case study. John had clearly learned about our client pipeline somehow. Tommy frowned. How could they know which companies we're targeting? I considered the possibilities. Either we had a leak, which seemed unlikely with our tiny team, or John was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He was fighting back with the one advantage he still had, deeper resources and an established market presence. My phone rang. "David Kim, my lawyer." "John, we need to talk." Nexus's legal team just filed a motion claiming interference with existing client relationships. They're alleging you're using proprietary information to compete unfairly. I felt my stomach tighten. "That's completely false." "I know it is," David replied, "but they're making noise about pursuing an injunction. Can you be in my office in an hour?" The legal meeting was tense but conclusive. David had reviewed every contract, every client communication, every aspect of Nexus' predecessor's business model. "Their case has no merit," he said after presenting his analysis to Nexus's attorneys via video call. Ms. John White's consulting work predates her termination by 8 months. Her clients approached her independently. She's not using proprietary technology or trade secrets. The general counsel from Nexus, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, wasn't backing down easily. "Mr. Kim, your client had access to confidential strategic information during her employment. Her new company is directly competing in our market space, using knowledge gained while she was bound by fiduciary duty." David leaned forward. "Counselor, general business knowledge and industry relationships aren't proprietary assets. Unless you can prove specific trade secret violations, this is simply competition. Healthy competition that your client seemed concerned about." The call ended without resolution, but the message was clear. John was scared enough to weaponize his legal team. That told me everything I needed to know about the impact we were having. The real confirmation came 2 days later. Elena Rodriguez, my former assistant at Nexus, called me during her lunch break. "They're panicking, John," she whispered. John brought in McKinsey consultants to analyze competitive threats. They've identified Nexus' predecessor as a Class A concern. He's been in meetings all week about client retention strategies. Well, Elena told me Next stopped me cold. They're offering existing clients 40% discounts to extend their contracts early. 40%. That's not competitive pricing. I told Tommy later. That's desperation pricing. They're trying to lock clients into long-term agreements before we can approach them. But John's strategy had an unintended consequence. Word spread quickly through the industry about Nexus's sudden discounting. Companies that had never considered switching providers began questioning whether Nexus was in financial trouble. My phone started ringing with inquiries from prospects I hadn't even identified yet. Jennifer Walsh from TechFlow called with news that changed everything. John, I've been talking to contacts at other companies using Nexus. The discount offer is causing more problems than it's solving. People are wondering what's wrong. More importantly, they're frustrated with the service limitations in those extended contracts. No customization, standardized support, take it or leave it terms. That weekend, I drafted a strategic plan that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Instead of fighting John for individual clients, we would position Nexus' predecessor as a premium alternative for companies that had outgrown standardized solutions. We wouldn't compete on price. We'd compete on value, relationships, and customization. The same principles that had made the original Nexus successful before John's transformation. Monday morning brought our first major breakthrough. Daniel Park, the product development manager who'd looked uncomfortable during my termination, called my personal number. John, I need to talk to you. Not about Nexus business, about my future. We met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto where I'd had hundreds of strategic conversations over the years. Daniel looked tired, stressed in a way I'd never seen during his 6 years at Nexus. John has killed every innovative project we had in development, he said. Everything that made our work interesting is being standardized or eliminated. 3 of our best engineers have already left for other companies. I listened without pushing, letting him talk through his frustrations. The cultural transformation John promised turned into cultural destruction. Nobody makes decisions anymore except him and his consultant team. We become order takers for specifications handed down from above. Daniel paused, staring into his coffee cup. I heard you and Tommy are building something new. Something like what Nexus used to be. I maintain careful neutrality. We are building something, but I can't discuss specifics while you're still employed elsewhere. He nodded. I understand. What if I weren't employed elsewhere anymore? 2 weeks later, Daniel became Nexus' predecessor's head of product development. His resignation letter was simple and professional, but his departure sent shockwaves through Nexus' technical team. Elena texted me that John called an emergency all-hands meeting to address the talent retention crisis. Apparently, he blamed outside recruitment efforts and hinted at legal action against companies poaching their employees. The irony was perfect. John's own policies were driving away the people who'd built what he was trying to scale. Our client base grew steadily throughout the quarter. Not just disgruntled Nexus customers, but companies seeking alternatives they hadn't known existed. Tommy's new automation platform was genuinely superior to Nexus's aging infrastructure, and our service model delivered the customization and partnership approach clients craved. By month 4, we had 7 major clients, 12 full-time employees, and a growth trajectory that put us on track to compete directly with Nexus's market share. That's when John made his biggest mistake. Rather than improving Nexus's offering to compete legitimately, he decided to eliminate the competition through acquisition. The offer came through formal channels. Nexus Corporation proposed to acquire Nexus' predecessor for $12 million in cash and stock. The letter, signed by John personally, suggested this would be mutually beneficial, allowing us to scale rapidly while giving Nexus access to our innovative approach. Tommy and I read the acquisition proposal in our conference room, both of us struggling not to laugh. He wants to buy us out, Tommy said. $12 million for a company we started with $200,000 6 months ago. It's not about the money, I replied. He wants to eliminate us by absorbing U.S. Classic corporate strategy. By the competition when you can't beat them. The offer included retention packages for key personnel and promises to maintain our customer-focused approach within Nexus's broader framework. I called David Kim to review the legal implications, then scheduled a response meeting for the following week. But I had no intention of accepting John's offer. This wasn't about building a company to sell. This was about proving that principles mattered more than profit margins, that relationships created more value than efficiency metrics. John had fired me for not being a team player. Now I was going to show him what real teamwork could accomplish. The response meeting took place in Nexus's conference room, the same room where John had publicly terminated me 4 months earlier. I walked in wearing the navy blue suit I'd worn to important client presentations for years, carrying a leather portfolio that contained our formal rejection letter and something John definitely wasn't expecting. John sat at the head of the table, flanked by his business development team and Rebecca Torres from legal. Tommy and I took seats directly across from him. "Thank you for considering our proposal," John began, his tone conciliatory but strained. "We believe this partnership could benefit both organizations significantly. Nexus has the resources to take your innovations to the next level, while your team brings the entrepreneurial energy we value." I let him finish his prepared remarks before responding. "John, we reviewed your offer carefully. The number is flattering, and I'm sure your intentions are genuine. However, we're going to decline." His confident expression faltered slightly. I continued, "We didn't build Nexus' predecessor to sell it. We built it to prove that the principles you eliminated from this company still create value in the market. Customer relationships, product innovation, cultural collaboration, everything your transformation process discarded as inefficient." John's jaw tightened. "John, I understand there may be hard feelings about your departure, but business is business. This isn't personal." I smiled politely. "You're absolutely right. Business is business." Which brings me to our counterproposal. I pulled a document from my portfolio and slid it across the table. Nexus' predecessor would like to acquire Nexus Corporation. The room fell silent. John picked up the document, scanning the first page with increasing disbelief. "This is ridiculous," he said finally. "You're a 6-month-old startup. We're an established company with 500 employees and $47 million in annual revenue." "True," I replied, "but your revenue is dropping. Your client retention is down 23% since my departure, and your best employees are leaving for competitors. Meanwhile, we're growing 35% month over month with 98% client satisfaction scores. More importantly, I pulled out another document. We secured $25 million in series of funding from Kleiner Perkins and Andreessen Horowitz. The same investors who've been watching your performance with concern since the restructuring began." Tommy leaned forward. "Our investors want to consolidate the enterprise automation market around companies that prioritize innovation and client relationships. Nexus used to be that kind of company. Now it's an acquisition target for a stronger competitor that understands what made it successful originally." John stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over. You're wasting everyone's time with fantasy scenarios." I remained seated. "John, you taught me an important lesson about modern business. Team players don't just follow orders. They build consensus around strategies at work. You eliminated me because you thought I couldn't adapt to your vision. But what I built proves your vision was flawed from the beginning." 3 months later, the acquisition was complete. Not our acquisition of Nexus. That was always a negotiating tactic. But Nexus Corporation was purchased by Meridian Technologies, a larger automation company that had been watching both our companies carefully. They kept the Nexus brand, but implemented Nexus' predecessor's customer-first operational model across all divisions. John received a significant payout for his equity, but was not retained in any leadership capacity. The official statement cited differing strategic visions about long-term growth priorities. Tommy and I were offered executive positions in the merged company. He accepted, becoming Chief Technology Officer with full autonomy over innovation initiatives. I declined, choosing instead to expand Meridian Strategic Solutions into a full-service business strategy consultancy. The irony wasn't lost on me. John had fired me for being an independent thinker who couldn't work within corporate structures. Now I was running my own firm, working with multiple technology companies to avoid exactly the mistakes he'd made at Nexus. 6 months after the dust settled, I received an unexpected email. John had been hired as CEO of a struggling software company in Austin. His message was brief and formal. John, I wanted to reach out regarding your consulting availability. Our board is interested in discussing a strategic transformation project focused on improving client relationships and employee engagement. If you have capacity for new engagements, I'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss terms. I stared at the email for a long time, remembering that Monday morning when he'd announced my termination to the entire executive team. The man who'd fired me for not being a team player was now asking for my help implementing the same principles he'd once rejected. I drafted 3 different responses, deleting each one before finally typing. John, I appreciate your confidence in my work. Unfortunately, my client schedule is fully committed through next year. I'd be happy to refer you to other consultants who might better align with your needs. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Sometimes the most professional response is knowing when to walk away. John had taught me that being a team player meant staying true to your principles, even when it costs you in the short term. In the end, integrity creates more value than compromise ever could. I'd built my company, saved hundreds of jobs, and proved that the old way sometimes really is the better way. All because a new CEO decided I was a team player. He was right, just not in the way he thought.